Hello and welcome to Agency Automators. This is a super big milestone for me. Probably is for you too, Jordan, right?
Oh, yeah. Very exciting.
When we started this over a year ago, we had a couple goals. Number one was to stack bills and make tons of cash. No, just kidding. What we wanted to do was we wanted to have you on as a guest. Like that was a primary goal for us. And we wanted to see if we could turn it into work, and we've accomplished both those goals. And so this is by far the most exciting one for me on a personal level, and it's just a huge pleasure to welcome David Krevitt from so many different things, whether it's Coding is for Losers, which was the foundation of my automation work, whether it was reading through a lot of the materials in the blueprint training, or just kind of watching everything that you've been doing with Ryan. So, Jordan, can we give him a little welcome aboard? So cool.
Thank you guys for having me. Knowing Jordan, I know we've been talking about doing this for a long time, so I'm glad we could make it happen.
Yeah. So, David, is it okay if I go into presentation mode a little bit? Because
Sure, yeah.
I love this. I think this is the coolest thing from I think it's from Blueprint, right? Is this from the
No,
Blueprint
you have to
website?
share
Oh,
your
web.
screen.
Oh, sorry. Details, little things. Give me a sec. What I loved about your website was that it says that you are potentially the best in the world at Google Sheets.
hmm
That's pretty killer.
Yeah, I'm probably not, but this is a time of this is a time of hyperbole, so I feel the need to go with it. It's like, why can't, if, you know, you guys know me a bit, and anyone who I'm friends with is like, I am the least hyperbolic person. I don't brag. I don't really talk about myself much. So just trying to get into that zone a little bit for the public presentation.
The thing that I'm crazy interested in learning more about is how you think. Before we get there, I want to explore a little bit your background and kind of how you got into automation. And it sort of like goes back to studying math in college and then starting
Mhm.
with BlackRock, right? So, what was that like? How did you get to be you having started there?
What's interesting is I think everything that I've done in this space, right? Working more with online businesses, startups, web-based businesses like we all do. Everything that I've applied in the last, 6 or so years, started Coding for Losers about 5 years ago, I would say. I
Yeah.
learned in working at BlackRock for a few years, um, which may not make sense on the face of it. But basically, what I was doing at BlackRock and what I was doing, I got lucky enough to intern at a company in college that BlackRock had kind of founded, right? It was like an internal company that they had seeded. Uh, so that's how I kind of made that jump. But all of the stuff that we do with data for web businesses, the stuff that the financial industry is doing with data, as you can imagine, right, because of their literal requirement to do these types of things, is happening at like 100x the scale, the consistency, the repeatability, the reliability that we're doing in the financial sector. So everything that I learned at BlackRock was, I thought I was going to like work in finance, right, and do like mortgage analytics and help people, invest in distressed mortgage assets, right, and stuff like that after the '08 crash.
Yeah.
But really, what I went there and was working on was the technology side, and I didn't know this when I took the job, right? It was kind of sat down. I was like, what is my job here? What am I doing? What's SQL? Why am I writing SQL? I thought I was doing finance.
Yeah.
Why am I looking at like algorithms written in Perl? I thought I was working in finance. But huge chunks of the economy, the kind of like hidden economy that we don't know about, run on these types of data pipelining technologies. So basically, I worked there for a few years. Always been interested in math, right? Like a lot of us, kind of was into that in school. But it's really just that little bit of work experience, seeing this stuff applied at like the largest possible scale. Everything I've done since then has been kind of like taking that and applying it kind of at smaller scale or with different types of data that we work with. So fundamentally, it's been just an exploration for me and, a lot of the folks that I work with for like, what can we take that these really large companies are doing and kind of democratize it, right? Like make more accessible to a wider number of people at a lower cost with a lower like technical bar. So to make more accessible some of these, like you could say, fancier types of data analysis processes, right?
Huh. And did you feel like you learned your marketing sort of bent when you're at Podia? Like to get your the growth hacking type mentality
Yeah,
there?
so some of my first like freelancing and I'm bouncing around a little bit because I'm sitting on a ball here, trying to stay moving, the quarantine. And I teamed up with a friend who I kind of met in a co-working space. I was building like an app I'd left BlackRock. Was just, working on projects, kind of getting my feet wet in the startup space, figuring out what I wanted to do next. And I met a friend who was a really talented marketer, a guy named Ryan Culp, who now is the founder of FOMO.com, if you know him. And Ryan and I started working together on marketing. He was doing a lot of freelance marketing for startups at the time, and had, kind of a client list, and definitely had more of a network than me in that space, right? Because I was pretty new. But I had a lot of these kind of like data skills, right, that he didn't have. So him and I teamed up, and he was really like the marketer, and I just like did data and automation, a lot of like sales ops automation for startups to support that type of work. So we kind of went in on you could call it an agency. It was, pretty freestyle. And yeah, we started doing that type of work, and I learned just really by doing, right, a lot of this startup marketing and growth hacking stuff. And really through that early experience, that opened my eyes to like how applicable a lot of this like data and automation type of stuff, and how like required it is for startups and online businesses that may not have data teams to do this stuff. So that opened my eyes. But around that same time, Zapier came out, right? Zapier was pretty new back then. This was, man, what year was this? I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago. I think that's about how old Zapier is. Zapier came out, Blockspring came out, which is now not really a thing, but similar to like a Supermetrics. So all these like no code type of companies started emerging at exactly that same time as I was getting into this type of stuff. And for me, it was like the first time I used Zapier, it was like, boom, wow, like
Totally.
absolutely wow. The most aha moment I think I've ever had of any product. And Blockspring was the same way. It's like, wow, okay, now we have these tools on the shelf. These are like so applicable for web businesses, for startups. These are like exactly the types of tooling that was missing for this type of work. So immediately once I saw that was like kind of the seed of coding is for losers, right? It was like, well, there's this market. Here's this more advanced stuff that I personally like have experience with, but here's this need and here's this tool set. So let's put all this stuff for the last like 5 years or so.
Yeah. Duh. Who didn't really, right? It's like, so I've taken, I don't know if I've taken all of your courses, but vast majority. And I still surprise people when I whip out the query formula and they're like, what is that? It's like, oh, it's the query formula. Haven't you heard of it? It's the coolest thing ever. Which is your most popular course? Can you share?
Yeah. So lately it's been the Build Your Agency Data Pipeline course. I think that's just the one I talk about the most, maybe. So and I think the BigQuery type of stuff is just most in demand.
Yeah.
But historically, yeah, I would say the query function course, definitely the top seller, and like the full package, like data analysis the lazy way course still sells pretty well. That's like Data Studio, um, functions, and yeah, the query and getting data like Supermetrics, Block Spring type of stuff.
Cool. Let's say you had to start all over now. The tools are so different than when you got started then. What do you recommend to young marketers or young automators getting started as gotta have technologies?
Yeah, I mean, I think learning about a dozen key sheets formulas. And there's a tutorial published on coding is rulers that has like 10
Hmm.
key ones. But I think there's just a handful of, first of all, spreadsheets is like the gateway drug. So that's kind of what all of our experience, I'm guessing, has been. And this was my learning path too. Like you get your feet wet doing a few things in spreadsheets so that you can put wins on the board, right? Like you can get some competence and confidence around like, oh, I can do this stuff with spreadsheets. And you get that sense of like a good feeling. We don't get into that like more human level stuff often because we're talking about this like nerdy data action, but it's super important to feel good about your learning path and feel like you're making progress, or else you'll just give up on it, right? And you'll just say, man, I'm not good at math. Spreadsheets aren't for me. I'm not good at spreadsheets. And just like you'll get that glaze over look when you open any kind of spreadsheet, right? Or anything with, math complexity going on. So I think that's like our biggest enemy when we're talking about learning paths is being turned off by the complexity. And that can happen if you just like eat too much at one time. So I recommend always like starting small with spreadsheets and becoming competent there. Learning some of the no code tools can really complement those. So
Hmm.
if you know a few spreadsheet formulas, if you know your VLOOKUP, right, your query, your array formulas, your ifs, your basic logic, and if you know how to use Zapier and maybe a Supermetrics or some of these other add-ons, right? Every tool is an add-on for Sheets at this point. If you can combine those, then you can get a lot done in spreadsheets. And I wouldn't, if that's where you're starting, right, with where you're learning, I wouldn't even bother going on to like learning SQL or learning actually to code in, Python or JavaScript or anything until you have like competency and can get stuff done in spreadsheets. It just will be too frustrating for you, and you'll hit that roadblock so much faster. But yeah, in terms of strategy of like where to, I think we can talk about like picking a path and following a path. But I think I imagine we'd all agree that like this stuff just happens. You don't need to plan it out in advance too much.
Hmm.
It's really helpful to just know like what's on the menu, right? Like what does Google Sheets do? What are these tools? What are they good for? What is BigQuery good for? Uh, when might I want to deploy some of these things? Um, so that when it comes up, and really only when it comes up, um, you can say, "Oh, okay, let's learn that now," because I think that would be useful. Um, and for us, right, like a lot of machine learning type of stuff is that way in terms of being on our shelf. Like we know how to use it, but frankly, it's not really applicable for a lot of businesses that we work with, or
Sure.
our kind of audience. Um, so we haven't bothered like deploying it at scale because no one really cares yet. Yet, but there will come a day, right, where the tooling and really like the black boxiness of it is reduced to the point where it becomes useful to people, if that makes sense.
How did you find that jump from Google Sheets to BigQuery? Because I know for myself, it was a very big and intimidating jump. How did you manage going from G Sheets to BigQuery? Because I know you're all about BigQuery these days.
Yeah. So for us, well, for me personally, I'm a little weird, right? Because databases are like a friendlier environment for me. So that was like my natural, you could call that like my natural habitat. So I enjoyed making that switch. But of course, there's a learning curve with any new technology, and that took a few months for us to really get familiar with it and build out something we felt comfortable like selling as a product or productized service. But I think the biggest jump is being comfortable in SQL and writing queries. That's, but if you are solid in the query function in Google Sheets, and that's why I stress the query function so much, is that one, it's really damn useful in Google Sheets. Like it allows you to cut out like so much, stuff that you don't want to mess with, sum ifs and all that messy formula stuff. It's not only useful in Google Sheets, it's useful for making that bridge, right? So if you can write queries in Google Sheets, then you really can be comfortable when you move to a database like BigQuery that you understand query logic, you understand how to write the statements, what the parameters are, and it really lowers your time to get writing SQL, and we can get into like DBT and some of the frameworks on BigQuery and all that stuff. But beyond writing the queries, all the tooling for getting data into BigQuery is like relatively commoditized at this point. And if you can do some of this no-code stuff in Google Sheets, with Zapier and Supermetrics and whatever the tool is, you can do all of that in BigQuery. So getting data into BigQuery and setting up your project is no longer the hurdle. It's really just like your ability to query.
I found your course pretty amazing, and what I was stoked on was the fact that when I started, I went from being able to conceptualize select all from dataset.table name where month is not null.
Mm-hmm.
That was the starting point for me.
Yeah.
And it went from there like, oh, I'll just take all my tables and join them without understanding like what a concept of a join was. And it was just this big, wide, meaningless table.
Uh-huh.
And then from there, it was like, oh, subqueries and join on the subquery. Oh, okay, I get that. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
cool. And then, so I learned how to do that in BigQuery. And then I was like, what is this DBT thing? He keeps talking about it in Center, and what is Center? And I don't see Center anywhere. And then when I got the whole thing working, it was just like, holy fuck, this is so much easier to do than with Sheets. Like my big aggregation query is 150 lines of code versus 30 formulas spread over 10 tabs in a Google Sheet. So much easier to maintain, and all the models are so much easier. Okay, before we get into your amazing stuff, can we just talk about problem solving? Because I want to hack your brain.
Mm-hmm.
I want to know how you approach problem solving. I want to know what you like to solve. I want to know how your brain works. I want to just get more insight into that.
Yeah, thanks for asking. So I used to have less patience, I think. So to me, problem solving is strictly about patience. And how much like pain are you willing to put up with? And how much are you willing to like just sit with a problem and let it come? And the reason I say that is because if it took me a while to realize this, and I'm still kind of internalizing it, but no one would come to you with a problem if it was easy. If someone had, if a client or, if someone on your team or whoever had already, it was easy to fix something and it was within their capabilities, like they wouldn't be talking to you. So by definition, if someone in our business, right, if we're talking about like a more service-based business or working for someone, right? I don't know what businesses don't operate like this, but we'll just say that. If someone's coming to you, it's going to be a challenge. So you're going to have to think it through. Like no problem's going to come to you that's easy. So that's first, accepting that is the important thing for me. And I always have to continuously accept that. And two, I work kind of by, and my team works kind of by like a menu approach. So not staying on the surface of the problem for as long as possible to like explore it, not prematurely picking a solution. Because the challenge, and I'll try and like visualize this a little bit with my hands, but the cost with problem solving comes in when you prematurely like pick a solution, go down that rabbit hole a little bit. It turns out to be wrong. You hit a dead end. So you come back out and then you have to look around again. So what we like to do is look around. So say you want to write a new API connection, right? A simple problem for data and automation. You want to get data from some random CRM that no one really uses into Google BigQuery. And this one comes up for agencies all the time, right? Like clients have this random CRM. We need to get orders data out of it to show how are our campaigns performing in terms of like closed deals. They don't have an API. It's not Salesforce. We can't just like use an off-the-shelf connector. So like, what do? First thing is like, get as much information as you can. Like read the docs. It's a simple step, but often overlooked. Like you really have to like, if we're talking about something data-wise or technical, like you have to fully understand the landscape of what you're dealing with. So read the docs, read the forums, see what people are saying on Stack Overflow, like get as much data as you can and start making a menu of options, right? Like easy one, you can export a CSV, right? And like use that manual hand crank. Maybe you can write an API integration yourself. Maybe that API integration could take a bunch of different forms, a Google Cloud function, on a virtual machine, whatever, write a Stitch connect, and just like all the examples of what you can do and add up like kind of a cost benefit of those, right? Because a lot of these things will take, easy case like dev time to do, or maybe some like long-term maintenance cost or recurring cost. So yeah, we kind of like scan the field, make the menu, and then we really like pick a direction, right, and go with that. But yeah, so we're kind of like menu based problem solvers, and that we found that to serve us really, and like the people we work with really well, because we don't take money for doing anything until we know exactly how we'll do it. So all of our like specs and definitely like anyone in the blueprint, right? We like encourage to take this type of approach. Like don't sell something that you don't know exactly how you're going to do it. And because it'll just.
Can you repeat that? I lost that sentence. You say anyone in blueprint. I lost
anyone in the blueprint. We talk about the agencies in the blueprint, right? We advise to like, don't sell a service that you don't know exactly how you're going to execute it. It's really tempting in the agency business because you have like the skill set in this team and you can figure it out, of course. It's really tempting, and I've fallen into this trap before, to commit to solving a problem before you've solved the problem, and to take money or sell the service before you know exactly how you're going to deliver it. It's like the shiny object syndrome of like cash up front, so we really advise like don't do that, because you'll just you're going to get burned one time in 10, and that's really going to suck, and it'll hurt your reputation.
Got it. Did you learn that lesson the hard way?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think everyone does, right? Like you commit to doing something that, we'll figure it out. We're smart enough. Yeah. And then what the real cost is not that you can't solve it, because everything ultimately, if it's technical, you can solve it in some way, but it's like, how much time do you want to spend? So my perspective is like, if you're working past like sundown, like either maybe that's your style, right? But it's not my style. If I'm working past sundown, I've done something very wrong, and I've committed to doing something that I really should not have.
That's great. Cool. So I was reading this book, and I keep talking about this in our Hangouts, called Range by David Epstein. Mm-hmm. Amazing book. It's like talking about how innovation and problem solving happens. and a lot of amazing innovators work exactly the way that you're describing. Like they know a lot. It's sort of like T-shaped marketers, but not exactly. It's like they kind of like dive in just barely below the surface on a lot of different things, and then that gives them the ability to create analogies for solving based on what they've seen and experienced or read about or whatever. And that very wide breadth of knowledge enables them to quickly solve problems in ways that people who get stuck in a stack just don't have a frame of reference that helps them pull things together. So it sounds like, would you describe one of your core skills as synthesizing, bringing together a lot of different things to solve problems? Or
Yeah, definitely. I would say so. Yeah, and I think I've been lucky to work with a lot of really talented people who are specialists in any one area, whether that's, writing Python code or writing AppScript or building SQL models or what, all the technical stuff, or statistics or whatever it is, or marketing. I myself am definitely not a specialist. So I think it works really well. And you guys, on your teams might have this dynamic where someone has to specialize. You need specialists, and you also need like generalists or synthesizers, as you call it, who can, kind of play around and more do like the architecture type of work versus necessarily always being like in the code, if you want to call it that.
one last question before BigQuery. I'm about to do my first team AppScript add-on. I've always built them by myself. I haven't worked with teams. How do you guys build your AppScript projects? Are you doing it IDE using class straight up to AppScript, and how does GitHub play into that process or flow for you?
We're always in GitHub. Yeah,
Okay.
so everything that we're doing goes through GitHub. Little shout out to my friend Harrison, who works at GitHub and got us a free team account way back when they still did that. Yeah, so everything we do in AppScript, and that makes it easy for me, right? Because I'm working across all these different projects. We publish, Python app that has a React front end. We have, AppScript add-on code for a few different things. So that makes it really easy for me to like scan, toggle between them, right? And work in issues. I can't imagine doing things any other way.
Do you go AppScript Editor online to GitHub through like Chrome Assistant, or are you using like Atom or VS Code?
I'm not. Yeah,
GitHub?
I think it's Chrome Assistant that syncs it. Yeah, it's basically AppScript Online Editor syncs with the GitHub repo.
And are you comfortable with multiple people touching it that way in that flow?
Yeah, I don't see why not.
Okay.
Generally, we work. I don't want to overgeneralize because our flow is generally like we have one person working on a given issue in an AppScript project at a given time, right? So it's not like we don't have like 5 different contributors working on different parts of the code every day.
Okay, cool. Do you want to jump into agency pipelines?
Sure. Yeah.
Do you want to share stuff? Do you have stuff you want to share?
Yeah, I could present a little bit, but I guess first we can just talk about like what is data pipelining, and
Sure.
why. I'd like to hear about your guys' experience too, because you've been through this type of stuff. I can kind of introduce. Why don't I can share my screen and just like show a few different pieces, right, of what.
That would be great.
How do things come together? So the long and the short of the agency data pipeline, or like any pipeline that we build in BigQuery, is that it almost doesn't, BigQuery is just like a means to an end. And let me see if I can do that. There we go. So BigQuery is just like a database, right? It holds all your data in tables. We'll wait for this to load in tables. So it's no different than like having, 100 different Google Sheets that are tables. So the agency data pipeline is basically a way to get out of working in Google Sheets, where often like your data size just breaks down, right? So you have tons of different, Google Analytics, Facebook ads, Google ads, SEO data sources like SEMrush, et cetera. And at some point, I think we've all experienced, you just reach the end of the spreadsheet. Your spreadsheets, dashboards, and like analysis templates take a ton of time to load. Your data, you can't store it anymore, right? If you're dealing with granular data, like by day or by campaign, that just becomes painful to manage. And most of us, I think a lot of us at this point, I'll say, are already working in Data Studio or something similar for reporting, right? So it's pretty common for this. This is a pretty common stack for, I think, people in our kind of space to have a Data Studio report, with fancy bells and whistles and all the charts that you need, and date filters and all this great stuff that Data Studio provides or similar tools provide, that reads a Google Sheet that has our raw data, right? So the point of the agency data pipeline and our recipe, query.recipes product, and anything that we're doing in BigQuery is to make this jump from, Google Sheets as your database to BigQuery as your database. But ultimately at the kind of business end of your reporting, whether it's Data Studio or elsewhere, not change anything. So it's really, how can you do what you're already doing, but in a scalable, kind of lazier and easier to manage way, in, I would say, like a more orderly fashion. So the entire goal of our data pipelining process is to bring order to, I don't want to call it chaos, but we'll call it like complexity. So we basically have designed a process where we get all of your raw data into BigQuery, whether it's deep crawl data, for SEO clients or whatever it is. We get all your raw data in. We run SQL models. You guys are familiar with DBT, right? So these are a handful of DBT models for Facebook ads, for Google Analytics. We roll everything up in some pretty simple models. This might look complex, but for those of you familiar, it is pretty simple. And then report on them, right? So at the end of the day, like if you set up a pipeline in BigQuery in a kind of orderly fashion, it will just make your life easier in terms of management, right? Like you'll kind of set some settings in your Google Sheets, everything rolls into BigQuery, and then you can be just a user of reporting and a data analyst versus, being such a data engineer or a data wrangler, right? As we like to say in your day-to-day life. So yeah, so at the kind of business end of agencies who set up these types of pipelines, and you guys might have set up yours like a little bit different, but functionally, what happens with these is you have a kind of set up an onboarding form, right, for new clients, of all the feeds that they want to set up, whether it's SEO, PPC, whatever it is. Those feeds get entered into like a tracking plan in Google Sheets, which is, contains all feeds, across Facebook ads, Twitter, etc. All clients, like a big client list. And then you use Google Sheets as kind of like a controller for the pipeline, right? To set like channel mappings for each of your clients. You set, these are kind of duplicates of the same thing. CRM mappings, conversion goals, all this good stuff, right? You can basically use Google Sheets as like your business and like tracking plan, to keep, like I said, like keep order in an extremely complex environment, right? Like a good sized agency, you might have something like, let's see how many. This is a pretty good sized agency that we had this set up for. They had over 600 data feeds. Wow. across clients. So they had about, let's see, I think we set up about 50 or 60 clients for them. So maybe 10 data feeds per client. And that's a lot to manage without
so are you going,
database.
So each of those clients,
Yeah.
is pushing to its own data set, right? And then all the data feeds and data sources are inside that data set in BigQuery?
Yeah, so generally we set it up as different, depending on the data source, there will be like a data feed per data source. So, I mean, a data set per data source. So like Facebook ads would be a data source, Google ads would be a data source. And then we have all clients within that unified data source. So we don't generally split out by client until we're at the, kind of reporting level. And even then we try not to, and just like do some kind of filtering to avoid clients seeing, each other's data.
At the new agency I just joined called 2 Octobers, I work with a great guy named Nico Brooks, and his method, or conceptually his mental model, was to unify everything into one reporting table and then have one report and then just use a single filter to filter by client. And I was like, ooh, that makes Data Studio fast and easy to build templates.
Exactly. We've found that we've built it both ways. And we found that way that you mentioned of one unified table and then filtering at the reporting level to be just the easiest to maintain. You don't end up with like 1,000 data sources out there, a few per client. It can be a real bear.
Wow.
Do you find that the pipelines that you're building are more geared towards external client reporting, so like actual reports are being sent to clients, or for internal data analysis and crunching?
I think external reporting is like the gateway for a lot of folks, because that's like a need to have. You need to have some type of reporting. But a lot of times what we're going to now is like a hybrid model where, like, we do this with the website quality audit that we publish as a recipe. So we have a Data Studio report that has like more, then that's the report I was just showing you guys, which is like a summary. You could use that as an external monthly report. But then we have a Sheets template that pulls data in from BigQuery to Sheets. That's an actual like worksheet, like action plan type of thing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's really where a lot of this stuff is headed, is you apply some business logic to the data. So, right, you're pulling out Facebook ads data and Google ads data, and you want to say, here's our rules for here's our like boundaries for where we want to be able to tweak things if we're performing, above or below a certain expected level on a campaign. And well, of course, reporting your overall results to your clients, because you just need to do that, but also generating like a Sheets workbook or some type of alert system to say, like, here's what you might want to check out today. Here's what changed this week versus last week that we think is relevant or anomalous, right, to dig into specifically.
Mm-hmm. Interesting.
What?
So that data you're pulling into a Google Sheet then, right? Not a Data Studio sheet?
Yeah, exactly. So you can do both. So with the website quality audit, we kind of have pre-canned views in Data Studio that you can export from Data Studio to a sheet. So we'll have like a big table that's really ugly, where the headers don't, they're all jammed in, right? Because they're in a Data Studio report, and the instruction just say like export this to Sheets once you've filtered. Okay, I can just show you guys actually. Let me share again. I'll show you this real quick. Cool. So this is like, we call these like actions within the website quality audit. Mm-hmm. And these are basically like technical or on-page actions that you might want to take for a site. So this is a, kind of an SEO recipe that we built in BigQuery and published. So this, you can see what I mean, like ugly table, right? A lot more data than you'd want to view in a Data Studio report. But so let's say we only want to like look at like high priority actions. We basically pull this up, pull a filter table up, and we'll say like export to Sheets, right? So we use Data Studio in this way a lot as like a generator of, kind of like Sheets workbooks.
Huh.
That's
very interesting.
we've both digested your videos where you make fun of Hamlet Batista and other people like him. I'm just kidding. I was just waiting till you were drinking to say that. But it's just, do you sort of fall down in like into the realm of thinking of solving the problem as simply as possible and only expanding the toolkit when necessary?
Yeah, I definitely do. I don't. Well,
And we love Hamlet. Sorry, we love you,
Yeah,
Hamlet.
no, I do too. I don't know Hamlet personally, but we've had some interactions, and I respect the work he does.
Yeah.
Um, I think some people have, everyone has their tool belt. My tool belt, I think, is like more generalist and a bit broader
Yeah.
than some people's. But I also like I have, there are people who I work with who specialize and are really good at like specific things. So I don't want to like put out the idea that like I don't believe in writing code just because that's like what, my blog is called. And coding's for losers if you haven't seen it. We write a lot of code, and like definitely like you look at our monthly accounting, like the majority of our expense line item goes to people who are writing code. So I don't want to like put out the idea there that like we don't write any code. That's almost exclusively what we do. But it's the type of code you're writing, right? And it's when are you deploying those things? So what we've found in building data pipelines and data analysis recipes in BigQuery is that if we can isolate problem solving to just writing SQL, then we can solve a lot more problems with the same data sets. So if we can treat getting data into BigQuery, getting data to our fingertips to analyze as like a commodity problem, and we can use one language, which is very general, right, SQL, to solve the vast majority of our problems, we're just in a better space, as a team, and it's much easier to share that type of work, right? Versus it's much easier to digest SQL as a consumer versus like a whole script that you may not be familiar with the language.
Killer. Super killer. Okay, I don't remember what the heck else. What other services do you want to talk about? I want to know about your, like, it seemed like Ryan just dropped the AppScript building. Hey, we can build anything. I thought it was super cool when I got that email. I was like, oh, okay. So what is this anything? Really? You can build me anything? I want to learn more.
Well, yeah, I mean, that is a fact. I think we have, the capabilities on our team have scaled up to the point where we feel comfortable saying like in data land, we can, in this, which is a narrow land, right? But I think it's the land that we all are working in to some extent. We feel comfortable saying we can solve like any data or automation problem, right? If you need to pass data between apps, if you need to analyze data in some way, like we can figure out the best tool for the job and help you do that. So I love it when Ryan throws out those like general, those general types of APBs, because I've had so many interesting conversations with teams off of that one email newsletter. But the fact is, I think there's a limited universe of stuff that we need to do as agencies. And it often revolves around like project management, right? We're using Google Sheets often, where you need to generate some templates that we use for clients. We need to share those with clients applicably, based on some settings that we have. So all of that stuff is easy to do in Google Sheets and AppScript, right? The really common one, which is in the project management suite that we published at the Blueprint, the blueprinttraining.com. No. It's the blueprint.training. Sorry, I don't know my own URLs. The blueprint.training. So we publish that, and it basically like allows you to add clients to a project management suite through a form that's in AppScript, and it like populates their client workbook, shares a client workbook, creates a bunch of templates, right? So that's the type of stuff that we find AppScript to be very useful for agencies. Kind of like repeating manual work and passing data around to make sure you don't have data entry issues. And that's kind of the extent of like our AppScript, custom work that we do, is like various like variations on that theme.
You mentioned before using like Google Cloud Functions. Mm-hmm. When does that come into play with automation on your end? Yeah,
so if we're writing like a one-off integration to BigQuery, that we don't, so like anything that we're repeating over and over again, right? Like a Google Ads integration or Facebook Ads integration, we build that into our internal like recipes tool, which we're like slowly opening up to the public. But if there's like one-off integrations, like for example, right, we're right now writing a WordPress to BigQuery integration for a client. So taking all the post metadata and post data, author data, etc., from WordPress into BigQuery. That's not, maybe we'll see, we might use this a lot, but it's a fairly niche integration. And so we're using, Google Cloud Functions to do that. The nice thing about using Google Cloud Functions is that you can write them, in nodes. You can basically write like AppScript functions that are transferable between Sheets and a Google Cloud Function. So that's been like a nice addition to our stack, because both the folks on our team who write AppScript primarily and like more the Python devs, they can both, write cloud functions for different purposes. It's not like limited to, to one kind of sector of our team.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask a question about DBT and how you set it up, because Jordan and I have spent hours talking about this. So for your what they used to call base models, and they're not calling them base models anymore, how are you materializing those when you're working in BigQuery? Are you materializing your base or as staging? Are you materializing as tables or incremental or ephemeral?
So incremental, those are slightly different, but it's in terms of tables versus views, I think, or ephemeral. Ephemeral just means it never gets created, right?
Right.
Anywhere. Views means it's created, but as a view, which we don't really like. Short answer is we generally materialize as tables, just so that we have visibility into what's happening in the models. Sometimes, generally the use of BigQuery data by the agencies that we work with is still happening in Data Studio, or still happening in Google Sheets. So it doesn't really hurt to have, say we'll have 100 tables in a data set. That doesn't really hurt that much, because it's not that challenging to browse. And two, it's not like the BigQuery browser is like the core use. So it doesn't really hurt us to have, more tables in there than we would like.
I was concerned about it from a budget perspective, because every time the models run and they're materializing as a table at that point, it looks to me, and I feel stupid for asking this, but it looks to me like what's happening on the fly is it's dropping the table out of BigQuery and rebuilding it. And I was trying to work that out of my head of understanding what the budget implications of that are. And I'm not dealing with millions and billions of rows. This is like 10,000 rows at the max for any of the tables.
Yeah, so short answer is your budget for BigQuery, if you're dealing with that size of data, will be so small that it almost doesn't matter. And second is, I'm not sure that ephemerality versus table will affect your budget much in BigQuery. I think the thing that will affect your budget most in BigQuery is partitioning and incremental runs of models. So if you're trying to save budget on BigQuery, which we all should, because these things have downstream implications. It's not just your budget increases. It's that we're, burning more energy, literally by running BigQuery queries in Google data centers, right? So
Yeah.
it behooves all of us to reduce our query load. It's not like something that doesn't exist in the real world. But the way that we do that is through partitioning and through incremental materializations in dbt.
So you're doing incremental for staging? Or
Yeah, so the way incremental, if you need partitioning though, let me step back. So sometimes with getting data into BigQuery, it's not always possible to have the raw table be partitioned.
Yeah.
But you can use dbt, and we love doing this, to create a partition table out of a non-partition table.
Sure.
If that makes sense. So
Yeah.
once you've done that at like the base level where you have partition tables from dbt to work with, then you can do incremental model runs in dbt. So you'll only run the models so you get new data coming in yesterday. And we do this at like the monthly level, right? Every day for that month that new data comes in, we only rerun models for that month. We don't rerun February's models in March because, that's already happened. The data's closed, if that makes sense.
Super cool. We're almost done on time, so I want to make sure we get to something that I know is really important to you. Tell us about your volunteering stuff and what causes you work with.
Yeah, so that's been a lot of fun. Again, it's been very incremental. So that group is called Nerds for Earth, nerdsforearth.com. And basically, I, kind of made friends with a bunch of people in California and Colorado and New Mexico and elsewhere, in traveling around the West and spending a lot of time in a lot of those more rural places. Made a lot of friends with people who are working in, kind of the intersection of agriculture and environmental work. So focusing on the issues of like, how can farms be a carbon sink, if you want to put it that way? And how can practices that are implemented on farms and ranches to boost soil health, also help the environment at large? Because having a very high functioning soil ecosystem, is generally, really positive for the planet. As plants grow, they suck carbon out of the air. And that is, kind of what we're looking to do right now.
Yeah.
So basically we can only solve problems that kind of come to us. So people submit things that they're looking to do at nerdsforearth.com. And we kind of assemble the people that are necessary to do that. Sometimes it's just me, sometimes other people will help out. And we just work on projects as people ask for help. So it's really like, if a project in that space, in that kind of like agriculture, environmental space, needs some type of technical help, whether it's like data or financial analysis, mapping, or whatever it is, we help out on that level on a volunteer basis.
Love it. Cool.
Very cool.
What did we miss? What do you want to talk about? Is there anything we forgot?
No, I think we really covered it. One thing I want to kind of share about, making this move from like Google Sheets to BigQuery, and kind of broadening your horizons in terms of your tool belt. I think I hear from a lot of people all the time that like, oh, that's not for me. We don't, that's kind of like outside of my skill set, or, oh, we do like, we're just doing like some PPC stuff. Like we don't need that. That's like for SEO. You know what I mean? Like there's always some reason not to, kind of expand your capabilities. I would say that like from personal experience and the folks that we've worked with and the people who've come through the, the agency data pipeline course and talking with you guys, it's like, this stuff is really for everyone. These are learning to work in databases versus spreadsheets.
David, hold on a second.
Yeah.
Can you repeat that? Because it was really garbly and I want to make sure that everybody hears it.
Yeah.
The
So,
one thing that we learned in talking with you guys was where I lost you.
yeah, exactly. So the thing that I've seen over and over again is that this stack of working in databases versus working in spreadsheets, and BigQuery specifically, it's for everyone. If you're doing any type of marketing data analysis, it can save you a lot of time, and really open up the scope of what you can do. So it's not, it's not like a technology that's just for one type of marketer or just for one type of team or one type of skill set. There's ways for everyone to take advantage of it. And from my perspective, like I've seen so many people flourish and thrive on this stack. For me, it's like an absolute no-brainer not to take a chance on making that jump, or at least exploring it.
When I think about how much easier it is, it's also stupid things like, what's the data type of this cell in a Google sheet? And why isn't my formula working? Or why isn't it showing up in Data Studio as a date field? Why is my date not working with the date picker? And it's like, oh my God, you're killing me. And you hook it up to BigQuery, and you just all of a sudden saved yourself 2 to 8 hours of bug hunting a month. That's just my take on it. But
yeah, it brings a lot of clarity in a bunch of different ways.
David, this was amazing. We really appreciate you spending time with us. You kind of opened up my eyes to what was possible years ago, and took me from a place where I had a pretty solid foundation in HTML and JavaScript, and got me to embrace Google Sheets, which led to everything else. And I'm incredibly grateful for what you've done for me personally. So I just want to say thanks.
Thanks. Appreciate that, Noah. Glad I can help.
For sure, man.
Thanks for having me on too. I had a good time. This is a fun little quarantine activity. So happy to be on. Happy to be on anytime you guys will have me.
We got you when you couldn't travel.
All right. Well, thanks, Noah. Thanks, Jordan. Appreciate it.
David, thank you so much.
Guys.
Yeah,
this was another great episode of Agency Automators. Everybody be good. See you soon.
All right.
Take care.